The only reason this case hasn't settled, guys, is because of politics and because of agendas, of bias, motive, something afoot behind the scenes where there's something nefarious. There's no reason for this case to have not settled by now.
In today's video, Attorney John Deaton discussed the latest with the SEC Ripple XRP lawsuit, the recent summary judgments from Ripple and the SEC, and what's next for the procedural process, likelihood of a settlement soon.
Let's say there is an investigation and somebody is found guilty. Could it be another example where we watch the debacle? Like, look at what happened with Gary Gensler a couple weeks ago. He was exposed in front of Congress. They put him on the spot. He was an idiot, exposed to the American public, no repercussions. Same situation a couple of weeks later. So my question to you is, if there is corruption, what's going to be done about it?
Listen, the thought of someone going to jail is slim to none. All right. I mean, the 2008 crisis happened. Nobody goes to jail. A lot of people, even when I bring up these conflicts of interest that I believe are so blatantly bad, you have a lot of people in the financial markets that go, yeah, but we've seen worse, and yeah, but that's just the revolving door at the SEC. That's business as usual. Well, then we got to stop business, because then we don't have a free market. Like, I'm a free market capitalist, right? I believe in free markets, and let the best technology win. And if ETH is the best technology and eats XRP's lunch, so be it. If Bitcoin, if they becomes, everything that in the Lightning project and all that is everything that Bitcoin maxis say it is, then let the market decide that. But you don't let individuals who are non-appointed political appointees, making these decisions to give passes to some people and no passes to others, and use lawsuits as a weapon. I mean, think about that famous, guys. Think about the famous clip of the billionaire. What's his name? Tim. He was on stage with Gary Gensler.
Remember his name? I'll Google it.
I can't believe I forgot his name.
Tim Draper.
Yeah. Thank you, Tim Draper. Thank you. Tim Draper's on stage, ironically, with Gary Gensler, and he's talking about this thing where the bankers and the incumbents, when this new disruption comes in, they get their regulators to sue you and they come after you. I mean, it's almost like they're like, this is just the way it is in America. And I'm saying we got to stop that. We got to there you go. We got to do something about it. It's ironic, right, that Elizabeth Warren comes out now, and not only does she blame the banking crisis on crypto, she blames the fentanyl crisis on crypto, just because, you can find one big purchase where somebody who's in the drug trade uses crypto. But we all know, if we're in the business, you're a moron if you're using a public distributed ledger. Right. Yes, your name doesn't say John Deaton bought cocaine today. Right. Doesn't say that. But if you see suspicious activity, you can track it. It rises to a level. You can get a search warrant. You can do all those things and capture the people. I mean, look at how much Bitcoin the United States government owns. Soon they're going to own some ETH.
Big thing everyone is debating to close out the Hinman emails is the statute of limitations rumor. On June 13th, 2018, William Hinman had an internal Howey memo involving XRP. Well, that's the exact same day that they are set to be released 5 years later. So let me ask you, is it a coincidence, or can we draw some connections here?
Well, listen, I mean, the fact that they add normally the Hinman emails were supposed to be released, not just Hinman emails, all of the documents that are part of the summary judgment motions. You got to understand, there are just thousands and thousands and thousands of pages, deposition testimony, all those things. So they were supposed to be due July 6th, but the parties both agreed for a 1 week extension because they needed to comply. So I think the date that they're going to be released is a coincidence, that it's the 13th and the 13th of the memo. But people keep talking about the statute of limitations. And yes, if the Hinman emails show some kind of criminal activity, then there'd be a statute of limitations bar of criminal prosecution. But if there's a basis to sue anybody from a civil liability standpoint, it's usually called the discovery rule. When you learn that and discover that that you've been harmed, right? Then the statute begins. So if there's a basis to go after anyone, the statute hasn't passed, and it would become, the trigger would be once we become aware of what's in that information. Because you can't bring a lawsuit unless you know you have a basis to bring a lawsuit, right?
I don't know what it would be against Hinman or against the SEC, but are either one of those a possible scenario?
Depending on what it shows, and coupled with other information, like I brought up an investigation, for example, and those Empower oversight. Remember, the Empower oversight wasn't just seeking Hinman emails. It was seeking the emails with a slew of people, emails with Consensus, with Joe Lubin, with all of those people. So if all of that is uncovered and it can show that a few people got together and decided to harm one group of individuals for the benefit of another, then yes, there could be theoretically a class action against those actors. Going after the SEC, is you got to get over sovereign immunity, qualified, all these things. And so I always tell people, when it comes to negligence, if the SEC's incompetent, you can't sue them. Bernie Madoff, right? We could all agree that the SEC was incompetent. Bernie Madoff investors sued the SEC under the Federal Tort Claims Act for negligence, and the judge dismissed the case because he said, hey, just because they're incompetent doesn't rise to the level. They have immunity, and also there's discretionary functions, whether you prosecute someone or not prosecute someone. There's all kinds of legal issues that go into play. But what we need is the release of the emails, but the release of all the things that Empower Oversight is seeking as well. What we really need is an IG investigation into why this speech was given.
In 2018, Ripple began offering ODL sales. And when we talk about a resolution in the lawsuit, there was this saying at the XRP Las Vegas conference where they were calling it splitting the baby, right? We could see the judge draw a line in the sand from 2018 forward, claiming that XRP was decentralized. But before that, it was offered as an unregistered security. Do you believe that's the ruling we're going to get? And if not, what are you anticipating?
Listen, I'm someone who said that the SEC, because of the theory they chose, may have snatched defeat from the jaws of victory. And it's because this, guys, when you start off as an altcoin, at the very beginning, Ripple had 80% of the XRP and the founders had 20.
Yep.
You got to sell it to someone or give it away. Whatever you're doing, those initial things meet the Howey test. If Satoshi Nakamoto, when he was mining, he, she, they, whatever, when he was mining Bitcoin by himself, right? If he would have said, hey, John Deaton, give me 25 grand and I'll give you 100,000 Bitcoin. And I did, and I sat back while he mined more Bitcoin and it became more, that would meet the Howey test, right? That specific transaction could meet the Howey test. And so yes, the judge could find those early sales as violating or meeting the Howey test. The problem is the SEC went with this all or nothing type of theory, right? That all sales of XRP, past, present, future, ongoing, in perpetuity, forever. The token itself is an underlying investment representation of an investment contract. So I think she's going to slam that theory down. They're going to lose that. Whether or not I believe she's going to split the baby, I can't really say, because we haven't seen a lot of specific sales, right? So for example, it's all been sealed. I can tell you, when you read the summary judgment briefs, The only thing the SEC said in the summary judgment brief was, well, in 2014, Ripple sent about a brochure about XRP to about 100 people. Now, the judge could say that that was an offering, right? That even though there may not have been any sales, that was an offering. And so if there are a lot of specific sales where she could dig her feet and hands into, then yes, conventional wisdom is that she could say 2013 to 2018, you're in violation, ongoing in future. But here's the problem, guys. There is no sufficient decentralization factor in the Howey test, and that's, so when people say, they rely on the Hinman speech of sufficient decentralization, that's not a part of the Howey test. And so if I had to pick a winner that would win everything, and I'm not picking it, but if I did, I'd pick Ripple to win because the SEC's theory is so freaking absurd. But the conventional wisdom is she'll find a way to split the baby, and we're going to see soon.
The biggest debate in the XRP lawsuit, is it an investment contract? What do you think?
Well, yes. And what's interesting is, I don't know if he regrets it or not, but Paul Graywell, who is the chief legal officer of Coinbase, he actually quote tweeted that thread of mine and said Deaton is basically 100% correct. And then of course XRP holders were like, okay, if Deaton is correct, why did you delist XRP, right? And so here's the thing, is that statute in 1933, it lays out a litany list of securities, stocks, bonds, promissory notes. Everyone could get their hands wrapped around that. Then there's this phrase that's just thrown in there. It's called investment contract. And so the law was, well, what does that mean? What does investment contract mean, right? Because we know what a stock is. You get Apple stock, Amazon. We know what a bond is. We know what a promissory note. We know what a mortgage is. Well, what's an investment contract? And that's when the Howey case came out, basically 13 years later after that was enacted, and said, here's what an investment contract is: an investment in a common enterprise where people have a reasonable expectation of profits derived solely from the efforts of others. That's become the famous Howey test. And the thing about it is, if you read the Howey case, guys, right after it lists that test that I just cited, it says whether or not the underlying investment has intrinsic value is irrelevant. What it's saying is the underlying asset's irrelevant. It's the circumstances on how you sold the contract. And so what I brought up at the XRP Vegas was beavers, right? They have utility. Beavers have a very specific utility in this world, right? They're very useful. They were sold, packaged, and offered to investors as a security, investment contract. We didn't say beavers are securities. Condominiums their real estate have been marketed and packaged and offered as a security, investment contract. Orange groves in Howey and oranges were packaged. And so the underlying asset itself is irrelevant. And XRP is digital code. It's software. It's digital. It's a line of code in a software program, basically, right? And so that's what it is. And so Bitcoin in 2013 was offered as an investment contract. But what does the SEC say today? Bitcoin's not a security. And so what frustrates me more than anything is when Gary Gensler and others like Elizabeth Warren and Brad Sherman, they go with that false narrative of crypto itself is a security. Now, I criticize some of my I don't criticize them, but I caution some of my beloved XRP holders who say ETH is a security. ETH is code too. It may be being offered as a security, Okay. But you gotta, words matter. And if we just allow the SEC to dictate the narrative, to cut the chase and say the token itself is a security, then we're not honoring the law. Because in 76 years since Howey was decided, there's never been a case that said the underlying asset in an investment contract is a security. And there's never been a case where the second sell of that first investment contract was also a security.
The number one question I have on my mind right now is the escrow likely to be involved in a settlement? There's been a lot of confusion about what Ripple's doing with the escrow. So I'm going to ask you point blank, could we see them, I guess, give up any of the escrow to a government agency like the SEC?
I think that if there was going to be a settlement, it would have been by now. And so the only settlement that I see coming is after Judge Torres gives a decision. Then there could be a settlement, because Ripple wants the clarity of no appeals and they just want to move on with their business. So they agree to settle. Or if it's a bad ruling for Ripple, could there be a settlement thereafter where Ripple agrees to give up some of the escrow or to limit their sales or whatnot? What's crazy is I think that the SEC, if it was being honest, the SEC would agree that ODL is not the sale of a security. In fact, Ripple, it's just bought for the temporary moment of the utility, and then it's sold back, right? So they're not holding XRP in a cold storage wallet after they utilize ODL. And so, the only reason this case hasn't settled, guys, is because of politics and because of agendas, of bias, motive, something afoot behind the scenes, whether it's just if it's as bland and vanilla as Gary Gensler wanting to get his greedy hands on the entire crypto market, or there's something nefarious. There's no reason for this case to have not settled by now. There's just absolutely no reason.
So let me ask you point blank, what are you anticipating? Maybe we got it earlier in the show, but I'd like to hammer it again right now. If we do get a ruling, what do you think it'll be?
I think that if there's enough specific cells in the documents that I haven't seen for the judge to hang her hat on, then she'll find that Ripple won't get a clean victory. However, a clean victory for Ripple is the more interesting thing is, does she agree that those cells go to the jury to decide whether Ripple had fair notice? That's the real bigger question for me. But I do believe, and maybe I'll come back on your show and eat my words, but there's a lot of talk lately about whether Judge Torres is going to even comment about secondary market sales. I will be grossly disappointed and discouraged and shocked if she just lets it go, because 76,000 XRP holders joined as amicus. I put the brief in there, focus on there, saying to her, look, I'm proving to you here that they're alleging secondary market sales. You have to put it into play. If she doesn't, I'll be shocked. So I think that XRP itself is going to be deemed not a security. I think that secondary market sales, she'll comment that even if she does do a ruling finding Ripple violated the law, that it doesn't apply to secondary market sales. But I think that it's possible that Ripple gets a good, clean victory in the sense of that fair notice issue. If she splits the baby, guys, and says from 2013 to 2018, before ODL, you met the Howey test. But ongoing and future sales, secondary market sales are not securities. But you get to argue to a jury that because of the Hinman emails, because of the speech, because of all of the FinCEN settlement, all of that stuff, you get to argue to a jury that you're excused from violating the law because you didn't get fair notice. That's a complete win for Ripple. Complete win, because then that's going to lead to a settlement for sure post ruling, because the SEC does not want a jury coming back. Yeah, I agree. The SEC didn't give Ripple fair notice. because then that affects all of crypto.
So people love hard percentages here. Let's break it down as if we had 100%. What do you give it as the likelihood the SEC outright wins, a Ripple outright win, or something in between? Can you break down percentage-wise what you're anticipating?
Oh, that's tough. I believe an outright total victory for the SEC to be less than 3%. I believe an outright total victory for Ripple, meaning she doesn't even hold early sales, to be a violation at 25%. I believe that scenario I just showed you, of splitting the baby, to be 50%.